Anything wrong here? This is the help desk, and doing things a little bit different today since George is not going to be here today. So I had a very great chat on the other show that I do with the other host. Her name is Gretchen, Trans Gretchen. So you should check it out. Rules of Nerdquisition. We had a great chat with an actor, author, writer, um, producer, Tom McLaren. And yeah, I wanted to replay this episode and replay this show, and yeah, definitely check it out.
Welcome back to the Rules of Nerd Position, and I have to say it as I do every time I got the name right.
First
Whenever I
time.
get the name right, I always mess it up. But actually, the last three episodes, I've gotten it right. I have not messed up our own name of our own podcast. And I'm very excited about that. So that's good. Today is a very special episode. We are broadcasting live for the first time on Ghost Claw Productions Radio at gcpr.live. We are also live streaming to our YouTube channel at Rules of Nerd Position and Instagram, Facebook, um, all the places. We'll throw the links up. We'll let you know. My dutiful and unflappable first officers here, as always, Gilbert. I am Gretchen. Gilbert, how are you doing today? And we've got a special guest with us.
Oh, I'm doing well. Doing very well. Always great to see you, Gretchen. Always great. And like you said, yeah, we have a very special guest. If a lot of people may not know, I don't know why you wouldn't know him. Um, he is an actor, a producer, and deep within the sci-fi and the horror genre. And so, yeah, everybody, I want you to please welcome Tom McLaurin. Tom,
Yep,
welcome to
Tom
the show.
McLaren. McLaren, like the
Tom McLaren. Ugh. Oh my God, that was great. That was really great. Way to go, Gilbert. Huh.
No, 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 no. Don't
Mess
be
up the
silly.
guy.
McLaren is one of those words that a lot of people will do it with two C's, which drives me bonkers. It's for me, it's one C, capital L, but I always just say it's just like the racing car, just like the racing car. Then it's easy to remember.
To be fair,
Yeah.
I was about to say, if I was the one that introduced you, I'd probably been like, today we welcome Mr. Tom Flood. I mean Tom McLaren, because we were introduced to you. We both knew who you were already, with some of your acting credits and stuff like that. But obviously, Steve Warnock had nothing but good things to say about you when he came on our show, and very excited about the production of Helios through Rogue Moon Productions, which Gilbert and I have had the distinct pleasure of hearing some of the unpublic stuff that's out there, and it's absolutely fantastic. I mean, we're already hooked.
So currently, we are hooked.
We
Oh, I'm
made the
glad.
joke that like we maybe could change our format. We'll just be a Helios podcast.
Yeah, because
Well, never
yeah,
say never.
it's real. It is so good. Like
Oh,
I was instantly hooked when I heard the very first, like, probably not even within 5 minutes of it. I was hooked just almost instantly.
oh, that's great. I appreciate hearing that. It's and a big shout out, yes, to Steve Warnock for connecting us and making all this happen. Steve's a great guy, and Steve, hello if you're listening. Steve was actually just in London, where there was a Space 1999 50th anniversary convention,
Oh
and
wow.
I believe they introduced Helios over there, kind of previewed it. It's almost done. I think Steve's hoping that it'll be out by the end of the year, but it was kind of a big splash to do that over with Space 1999, and of course Nick Tate is in the audio drama as well, and everyone knows Nick Tate as Captain Alan Carter from that great sci-fi TV series. So Helios is kind of launched with a big deal in London, and so it's upward and onward, and we'll see where it leads now.
Great. Yeah, you guys have a
Awesome.
great
Sounds great.
cast too. Yeah, and I would be remiss if I didn't do this. I have to give a shout out and a hello to you from my father, Tom, because he absolutely. I know you were based on your credits. You were only in one episode of the Netflix remake of Lost in Space. He absolutely loves that show. So I mean, And he is the foundation of all of my love for things sci-fi. So
Oh, really? Oh, that's
yeah,
great.
so
Well, hello, Dad, if you're listening in. Yeah, listen, Lost in Space is the franchise which really influenced my entire life, to be honest. It started when I was a little boy, and I was watching reruns during the summers when I wasn't in school, and I lived in the Chicago area. And I remember being in my living room with my family, had a little black and white television set, and I would watch it during the summers, and it was the one show that really captured my imagination. It's just something special. I consider myself part of the TV generation, so I'm one of those kids who came home from school and watched reruns until dinner time.
yeah.
And that's where I got a lot of my favorites. That's where a lot of my influences came from. And I'm very loyal to those shows and those actors. So I grew up with Lost in Space and Star Trek, the original series, The Munsters, I Dream of Jeannie, Gilligan's Island, all those great, great shows. But it was Lost in Space that I loved the most. And I don't know, it's hard to articulate why, but it had the fantasy sci-fi element and the monsters and the aliens and the spaceships and it had all those fun, fun things. But there was also an underlying family element to the show. I was really interested in the series regulars. I got very attached to them. So I gravitated more towards the younger ones, well, young Will Robinson, his sisters Penny and Judy Robinson. But I loved all of them. There was something special about those people in those roles at that time. It was just like the perfect storm of elements. I mean, for me, who didn't want to be Will Robinson and have these adventures on a daily basis on these planets with these monsters and have all this fun? It just seemed like the coolest thing in the world. And so I was very loyal to Lost in Space and I stuck with it. And when I'm loyal to something, I stick with it my whole life. So I followed the
Yeah.
actors, I watched all their other acting appearances, and then in the 90s, it started to come back around again. I think the Sci-Fi Channel was doing reruns. Columbia
Hmm.
House, who are old enough to remember, started doing their series of VHS videotapes. You used to have to buy, I think it was like one a month or one every 2 months, and you'd get two episodes on a single VHS video cassette for $20 plus $5 postage. And to buy the entire series of Lost in Space, got to realize there's 83 episodes plus a pilot. So that's 84 episodes. So divide that by two, and that's the number of video cassettes you had to buy back in the old days. And of course, that was on the cusp just before DVD hit and so forth and so on. So the franchise really just kept going and going and going. And I credit that to a gentleman named Kevin Burns, who's no longer with us. He passed away during lockdown. But Kevin was the keeper of the flame for Lost in Space, all things related to Lost in Space. So he really rejuvenated it with conventions and TV specials and merchandise. And he was a producer on the New Line feature film that came out in 1998. And then to bring it full circle, he was a producer on the Netflix TV series, which ran for 3 seasons. So it's because of Kevin that I ended up doing an episode of that show. And talk about a highlight in my life. I mean, I get to be on the bridge. So all sci-fi fans want to be on the bridge, right? So the part that I ended up getting, I'm on the bridge of the spaceship Resolute. And so that, in and of itself was a dream come true. But the fact that it was lost in space was even better. It was just, thinking of myself as a 10-year-old boy watching this old classic TV show on television, the good old days of television, not streaming, and then being there on set in Vancouver, this big, big budget production, this massive sound stage, having my own luxurious trailer. It was like the best of the best. And I'm so thrilled that I got to do that one episode. It's just a highlight of my life. And not everybody gets the full circle moment in their life. But for me, from when I was a little boy to this point, and I filmed this in when did I film this? I think it was December of 2018. It aired 1 year later in December of 2019, and it still lives on and on via Netflix. So I'm grateful for this moment.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. I mean,
that's an amazing story. Because
everybody wants their Captain Cisco moment, as I call it. I mean, you've all seen Trials and Tribulations. That one moment at the very end when he gets to walk up to Captain Kirk, and I know it was all CGI and stuff, but hands him the little I don't know etch a sketch pad with
Right?
his
Yeah.
thing.
Handsome,
It's like
handsome's pad and say, here you are, sir.
I would just
Oh,
I just like to be a crew member walking down the hallway when Riker walks by or something, any of that. We've all dreamed of that, of course.
I know
Just
when,
right.
when I was
Yeah.
when I became an adult, my favorite show became the X-Files. So I kind of evolved from Lost in Space up to through Twin Peaks and the X-Files, and the X-Files was my is my all-time favorite show as an adult. And I remember when they were filming the movie, the second movie, and this was long before I was an actor. My wife worked at 20th Century Fox. She was an executive at the studio for her entire career. And the word came down that they were looking for extras to be in this the scene at the beginning of the movie where they're on the ice pond and then all the people are lined up, and so that you could in theory go up there and be an extra. And I thought, oh my God, I should do this. This is so cool. And she asked around, and they said, well, maybe it's going to be brutal because it's going to be ice cold. You're going to be standing outside for 16 hours a day, and you're going to be an extra. You're going to be background, which means you're not going to have like a trailer or anything nice. You're not going to have a little heat lamp or anything. And they said, well, why don't you come up for a visit? You and your wife come up for a visit. So that's what we ended up doing. And that was, what was that? I think that was 2008 is when we went up to Vancouver. And I was not an actor yet. And we just went up there and we visited the set and we watched Gillian Anderson and David Duchovny film this key scene in the movie. For those who can remember the second movie, X-Files, I Want to Believe, it's the first scene where they get together at Mulder's house and David has a beard on. We watched them film that scene into the evening, and it was just, oh my gosh. Meeting David and Gillian and Chris Carter is just amazing. So, see, I'm a fanboy too. So
right.
those are my roots. So that's why I love your podcast, and I love what the two of you are doing, because it really is about the fans, and I love that the phrase nerd has come back around and is like cool and acceptable now. When I was a kid, when I was a boy, nerd was a put down.
It was.
Nobody
Oh
wanted to
yeah.
be called a
Yeah.
nerd, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's the last thing you wanted. But I think it came around, and I don't know how to place it exactly, but I think my theory is San Diego Comic-Con became a big deal in the 1990s. And so I think then the studios and the networks realized, oh, there's power and there's money in those nerds. And, we need to actually pay attention to that. And I think that's when the fans got more power. That's certainly when the showrunners got more power. The people behind the camera started doing the panels at San Diego Comic-Con. And I think that's when it switched. I think it's when it kind of flipped. But it's what should have happened a long, long time ago.
You
So
should have.
yay to the
Yeah.
fanboys and fangirls, fan everybody.
Ban everybody. Absolutely. No, I get it. And definitely like platforms like YouTube and stuff have really launched a lot of us into this exposure that we had. I had a makeshift Star Trek outfit that I wore to school once in eighth grade. And at that time of my life, I'm 50. That was the worst decision of my life. And that I did not live it down for many years, but now you can do that. And it's a cool thing. It's
Well,
it's
see,
not
I would
ostracizing
always
anyone.
I would always tell everybody, I would tell people this, when I was in high school, I was a geek. But when I went to college, I became a nerd. But then when I graduated college, some of the stuff I forgot. And so I downgraded myself back to a geek.
Ah, there's you see, there's levels.
So I sounded like a ranking system.
I remember when I was young, and there was always that Trekkie versus Trekker differentiation, and so yeah, the geek versus the nerd. Yeah, I hear you. I get it.
we we spoke with Chris Hunter, the son of Jeff Hunter, on one of our
Yes,
episodes, and
yes.
we were having that conversation with him. Like, well, how do you identify? Are you a Trekker or a Trekkie? He's a proud Trekkie, actually. Most
Ah,
people from that time frame were like, I'm a Trekker, and they would really, really
They
stick
were
with that
hardcore
until
about it.
don't call me a Trekkie, but he was like, oh no, I'm a total
Yeah, I
Trekkie.
remember there was a backlash against the phrase Trekkie, and I'm not sure how or why that started. Maybe it was the first phrase, and then it became kind of a, a put down in the non-fan perspective. And so maybe that's why people switched over to Trekker. It sounded more serious, more adult. But, listen, Lost in Space is obviously, a key part of my life, but out of my appetite from Lost in Space, I then found reruns of Star Trek, the original series, and then I found Space 1999. So those three sci-fi TV series made a huge impact on my life. I'm still loyal to them today. I still watch them today. I have the Blu-rays. I'm and I know that I actually live relatively close to Walter Koenig. And I have seen him at lunch twice at two of the restaurants that I frequent. And he's such a wonderful guy. So I'm at this restaurant the first time. I'm having lunch, and I recognize him, of course, sitting over there at the table, and I don't say anything, and I'm like, oh my God, it's Chekhov's over there, Walter
Right.
Koenig. And so as he's leaving the restaurant, he walks by my table. I'm there with my wife and a friend, and he comes to the table and he starts talking to us and saying, "Oh, isn't the food here wonderful? Isn't this a great restaurant?" He just strikes up a friendly, honest to God friendly conversation, just the nicest man in the world. And so we had this wonderful little chat, and I said, I have to tell you, I do love Star Trek. And he was wearing this blue kind of satiny jacket that had his name Walter on it. So it's not as though he was going completely incognito. And he was totally cool with me bringing up that reference. And I said, gosh, I've never really asked this in public, but can I take a picture with you? And he said, oh yeah, sure. It was all wonderful. And he was there with a family member. I can't remember what the relationship was, whether it was his daughter her granddaughter, but she was wonderful. They were just both so wonderful to us. And then a couple months later, I saw him again at another restaurant. So I get to see, him from time to time just by the coincidence of living in Los Angeles. See, that's one of the fun things about LA is you never know who you're going to run into and when you're going to run into them. Where are the two of you located at?
So
I'm
you can
actually
go
I'm in
go
South
first.
Carolina,
Oh,
so yeah, I'm not gonna see anybody.
you're not going to see anybody until South Carolina gets great tax credits and they start filming, NCIS whatever in South Carolina. Then you're going to see everybody.
So yeah, I was actually
Yeah,
going to lead into this because I wanted to talk to you, a little bit about your background. You are a graduate of University of Michigan. You have a bachelor's in business association. Now,
Business administration.
administration, correct. I'm not going to hold that against you. I am from this. I am from the state down south of that.
Oh,
So yes, I'm from Ohio. I'm in Central
oh,
Ohio, and but yeah, I
I
just
never understood the rivalry between Michigan and Ohio. I guess, we learn at a very young age. You got to love somebody, you got to hate somebody. We learn that honestly with sports. I think that's one of the first exposures we have to this love-hate thing. I'm not sure it's healthy when you think about it and we start talking about it. Like, why would the Michigan people hate the Ohio people and vice versa? But
right.
but I bet it was, as long as it's in the
uh,
spirit of fun.
I do it mostly out of a sense of I kind of feel like obligation. Like I'm in Ohio. I sports wise, I'm a hockey girl. I don't really watch any other sports. That little known fact, Ohio and Michigan did go to war many, many years ago over the city of Toledo.
Really?
I don't know
hmm.
why, who would want to fight over Toledo. But anyway, um, the thing that interested me
Hey, I
most about
guess
your
people need
somebody's
to
got to
fight
claim
over
it.
something. I don't know.
Somebody's got to claim it. And as far as I know, in that war, the two small armies wandered around in swamps and forests and never actually ran into each other. They couldn't find each other to actually fight. So it shows you how incompetent they were in that war. But the
Right.
thing that I was most excited about, and I told you this in email, Tom, you got your career in film and TV and so at middle age. You brought this up, and again, that gives hope to an old girl like me. It's just
Right. Same to
yeah,
myself.
right.
Well,
Tell us a
yeah,
little bit about that.
my story is different from the average actor. There's no doubt about that. I mean, most everybody starts around age 20 or certainly 30 at the most. And I never planned to be an actor. I mean, when I was a little boy, certainly. And I'm watching these shows that we've talked about. I mean, who didn't want to be a TV actor and be on Gilligan's Island or on the
Right.
Jupiter 2 or the Enterprise? I mean, who didn't want to do that? So there was a brief period when I was a little boy, pre-puberty, where I thought, well, maybe I should be an actor. That looks like so much fun. And then puberty set in, and my self-confidence went out the window. And I just did not have the confidence to pursue anything like that. I knew I was good at academics. I did not have confidence for the arts and for the athletics. So I just focused on academics and I went down that path. And I think I was, destined to be a businessman. So that's why I went to the University of Michigan and got my BBA. And I went back a couple years later and got my MBA from Wayne State University in Detroit. And I was on that path of corporate business, climbing the corporate ladder. But I kind of woke up in my 40s and I realized, I'm not really happy on a day-to-day basis. And Sunday night, I remember my stomach would go into a knot because it's like, oh God, I've got to go back to work on Monday morning. And it was just, I thought I'm miserable. I'm thinking about retirement. I actually, should I admit this? I started thinking about retirement when I was in my late 20s, right after I started my business career. I thought, I don't think I can do this forever. And when do I get to retire? And can I save enough money? And can I retire young? Can I retire early? I just couldn't get out fast enough. And I was well suited to it. That's the funny thing. Um, it was good for me. I loved having a full-time job with benefits, and it was all great, but it wasn't so much the work, it was the people that I was working with, to be frank. There's a lot of people who fall into business because they can't figure out what else to do. And so they kind of learn at a very early stage, how do I do the bare minimum and still get that paycheck? So the level of mediocrity in the business world is really shocking. And, people are just, putting their time in trying to get a paycheck, and people aren't caring. They're not conscientious. It's not a creative career in most respects, in most instances. And so people are just punching the clock. And I thought, God, this is miserable. And this is my life. This is it.
Yeah.
This is what I went to
Hmm.
school for, and this is all I'm going to get. And I was very disappointed. And so in my 40s, I kind of, I sat down and I talked to my wife, and she was happy in her business career at 20th Century Fox. She was a top executive there. She was the chief operating officer for international theatrical and worldwide home entertainment. So she was very, very, very successful, and she was happy and settled in a very stable career. I said, I'm miserable, and she said, well, listen, just quit. Go ahead, do it, and do what you want. And so we were in a position with enough stability and financial stability that I could do that. And so, bless her heart, that's my wife, Mary. I just flat out quit one day, and which is a bold move in and of itself. And I thought, well, I don't really know what I want to do. And I stumbled for a couple of years. I just stayed at home and I took care of all those home improvement projects that you talk about and never do. And I read books that I were stacked up. I opened DVDs that were still in the shrink wrap. I'm a physical media guy. I had that time for a couple of years, but I thought, I'm too young to completely, utterly retire. What do I want to do? And I thought, this thing in the very, very back of my mind, I mean, buried almost as deep as you can bury it, was, I never really tried being an actor. I never tried it at all. I didn't try it in school. I didn't try it in college. I didn't do community theater. I never acted a day in my life. I thought, well, it seems like it could be a good, fun job, but who knows? It's not for everyone. I knew that. And the question is, would I like it? Would I have any skill for it? It was all a big mystery. And I thought, as I was getting older, I'm in middle age at this time, and I'm like, I don't want to have any regrets when I'm 60, 70, 80 and go, you know what? I never tried it. Who knows? It was a mistake, a missed opportunity. I didn't want to be that old guy and say that. So I thought, no, yeah, no regrets, no turning back. Let's actually give it a shot. So there was one day, it was September of 2011. So that's that 13 years ago right now, probably almost to this very day. Actually, ironically, it's probably almost to this very day. I remember being at home. My wife was at a business dinner, And I sat down with my laptop and I Googled acting classes San Fernando Valley. And the first
Oh
one that
wow.
came up
Okay.
was the Bill Howie Studio in Burbank. And they had an introductory slash intermediate class that was starting in a week or two. And I thought, okay, this is Kismet. This, it does say introductory. I knew I wasn't intermediate. It does say introductory. So the very next day I got on the phone, I talked to Bill Howie's wife, and I said, listen, I'm interested, but do you take older people? I apologized for it.
No.
And she was wonderful. Listen, she was great. She said, listen, and this is the word, that message that I spread to everyone, to both of you, if you're got creative interests you want to pursue. You can be an actor anytime at any age, with any look, any weight, any skin color, anything. You can be an actor anytime. You don't have to be 20 and look like a 20-year-old Tom Cruise. You don't have to do that. The example she gave me was a senior citizen, a woman who had taken their class, and she ended up getting a national commercial campaign out of all that. I mean, she went through the class and she started auditioning and she got a national commercial. And so she's the glowing example of success. And I thought, wow, that was exactly what I needed to hear. So bless Mrs. Bill Howie's heart. I signed up, and on October 3rd, 2011, I walked into that class terrified.
Mhm.
That was my very first day.
I can imagine that would but yeah, I mean, to just that you could jump into that is awesome because like you said, when you hear about other actors, I mean, if they didn't just shoot their shot and move to LA or
Mhm.
something or Hollywood in their 20s or 30s, they're being groomed for it, even though that's a sort of a bad word these days, but being groomed for it from very young age. Their parents are putting them in beauty pageants, trying to get them in commercials and stuff like that. These
Right.
people, they're going to acting schools and theatrical schools and stuff like that. And the fact that you could walk in there and do it like any one of us. I mean, you have a degree in business administration. I'm an accountant. Gilbert's an IT professional. I mean, do we not have like the most common nerdy jobs of nerdy people out there? I mean,
Right. And I
Well,
mean,
let's.
quite honestly, and it's pretty much kind of inspirational for me as well because for years I've been working on trying to do 3D animating and
Ah,
basically to make my own 3D movie and 3D series.
oh, great.
And so yeah, and 3D is hard. I'm just going to put it out like that. It's hard to learn. There's quite a learning curve to it. And so the simple fact is that just hearing your story and knowing that you started your career, I'm going to call it, you started your career in your 40s, in
Yes.
which I currently am in my 40s.
Yeah.
So yeah, that definitely it's very inspirational for people like myself and for anybody else that is just wanting just to take that step, but are just scared to do it.
I think yeah, that's the key word there. I was just going to say it was scared. I think there's a lot of people who are just afraid of failure and afraid of trying, and
Mhm.
nobody should really live their life that way. I mean, I understand it's hard to get out of the rut that you're in. And like when you have a business career, you're in a pretty deep rut seemingly because you've spent all this time and effort, and if you've went to school for it and you've gotten degrees for it, or you've gotten years and years of experience, and you've got this resume that's great. It's hard to do a drastic change. But I think, you have to just listen to your inner voice, listen to your heart, which sounds like a cliche, but it's so true. Don't be afraid of failure. Give it a shot, because when I got into this class, so October 3rd, 2011, I was terrified. I was the older guy in the class. I was surrounded by um, basically 20-year-olds. I mean, some of them were like early, or some of them were mid 20s, I think, but I was literally the dad, you know, of the class. And they were some of them were starting off brand new, just like me. A couple of them had a little more experience, but I just felt that this was the environment that I should be in, and I need to test this out. So to tell you the truth, I didn't tell a soul when I took this class. I didn't tell anybody for a couple of months because, except for my wife, of course, obviously she knew. I thought, I have to go into this and make sure that I like it first and foremost. Because not everyone is comfortable being on stage, being in front of other people, withstanding that type of pressure and taking direction and memorizing it and all these things you have to do to be an actor, a lot of which has nothing to do with acting. Memorization has nothing to do with acting, but you have to get through that hurdle. So I thought, am I going to like this environment? I need to test that out first and foremost. And then I've got to decide, do I think that I've got any type of skill for it? So you do have to build up a certain amount of self-confidence to get there. So fortunately for me, in the first month, I would say it all kind of started to cement and solidify for me. So I knew it was right for me. I knew there was something worth pursuing. And so I stuck with it and I was very dedicated. You see, I came into it with that kind of business mindset. Approach this as a career, approach this as a profession, take it as seriously as you would a business career. See, a lot of people don't do that with acting and entertainment. They kind of do it as a lark, and they do it because they know they're good looking or whatever the reason is, and they get into it and they're not that serious about it. I mean, I've certainly been on projects where actors have backed out at the very last minute just because they're flaky, and I'm thinking like, wow, why would you treat, someone who hired you like that? Why would you back out on a job at the very last minute? That's very unprofessional and very rude. But I think that the business mindset, which obviously you both have, is a good one to have. It suits you well no matter what profession you go into. Those skills that you fine tune over time, they're useful in entertainment. They're useful in a variety of other professions, including more creative professions. So, I think that the business background is so important. And jumping on, accounting, which Gretchen you were talking about, yeah, my background was basically accounting and finance. My bachelor's in business administration was kind of in a the U of M had a general program where you didn't declare a major. It was basically just a overall bachelor's in business administration, so you covered all the functions. But my MBA was in accounting, so I went down that path. I worked in banking initially, and then I crossed over to the business side of entertainment. My wife started her career at CBS Fox Video. For those you may not be old enough to remember, but CBS Fox Video was a partnership back in the VHS and Beta video cassette days, back in the grand old days of Blockbuster when it first started,
I remember
and
Blockbuster.
rental video cassettes that made all the money
Oh,
for.
I spent many a weekend at Blockbuster.
Oh, I loved Blockbuster. Oh boy. But
Birthday
Mary
parties.
got this dream job at CBS Fox. And so CBS Fox was originally based in Michigan, surprise, surprise, not in LA or New York. It was originally in Michigan, and then it transferred to New York City. And so she went with the transfer, and I went with her, and they had a lot of openings. So I joined CBS Fox in Manhattan in 1989 as I think I was a senior accountant. I think was that my title? I got promoted pretty fast, but I think I was a senior accountant. And then it came to Los Angeles. It became Fox Video. But my career ultimately, I mean, Mary stayed with Fox, long story short. I moved over to Warner Brothers where I spent 15 to 20 years. And at the peak of my Warner Brothers business career, I was the director of budgeting for the studio operations division. So I was a finance person. So I was very cemented in that path, but I broke free. So trust me, if I can do it, anybody can do it. It's scary and it's hard,
Of course, it
but
is.
you can
It
do
So
it.
of
is.
course, yeah, like any big major change is always scary and it's always hard. And I mean, yeah, everybody's gonna say, "Oh, well, it's easy for you to say. Just do it." But yes,
You have to
but
have a lot of
but
things.
you got to have a plan.
You do because
And
I mean, I didn't. One of the reasons I didn't want to be an actor at 20 was I didn't want to be the starving actor. I didn't want to sleep on a friend's couch. That just wasn't the lifestyle that was right for me. I get that people do it, and I totally respect that, but I knew it wasn't right for me. I had come from, you know, a family situation where money was very, very tight, and I wanted a stable income. I wanted a
Mhm.
paycheck every 2 weeks. I had a regular
Of course.
full-time job. I wanted benefits. I wanted all that stuff. So I didn't want to be that guy who literally, kind of begs favors, and it just wasn't right for me. But you've got to be comfortable with the situation that you're in, and you've got to be able to view the future in at least blocks of time. Like, what do you want to do in 5 years or 10 years? Um, a lot of people will go into acting and they don't hang in there. They'll give it their best shot and then they move on and then they typically will go back to like a business job. And I totally understand and respect that. It's a hard profession to be in. I don't know if you guys want to talk about that or not, but it's a very, very hard profession. Most interviews, when famous actors give interviews, they always talk about how wonderful everything is, how glowing everything is. And let me tell you, it's not like that. I think everybody knows about competition and rejection. I mean, if you don't know about that, you're very naive and you shouldn't go into the business.
Right.
But those are
Right.
givens,
Absolutely. Yes.
competition and rejection. But it goes deeper than that. It's a very rough profession.
I can imagine. And I would love to hear about some of the difficulties that you've delved into or had to deal with in that particular profession. But I wanted to mention something you mentioned Fox, and it got me on a side thought here because I did watch your CBS Live interview about the book that you put out,
Oh yes,
which I thought was really interesting. Styling the Stars, Lost Treasures from the 20th Century Fox Archive.
yes.
Um, just seeing in the interview and then having gone and looked at the book on Amazon and other places that might be available. I mean, how cool is that to kind of
Oh
find this like I don't know this pirate treasure of Hollywood history. I mean,
yeah, you want to
That
talk about the
that
fanboy? If I call it the goosebump moment. Um, the book Styling the Stars was actually my first creative project. I started that before I started acting. It was also in 2011. The story goes, my co-author on the book is my friend Angela Cartwright, who
mhm,
most everyone will know from The Sound of Music. She played Brigida Von Trapp, and
mhm.
Lost in Space, she played Penny Robinson. I had been friends with Angela since the late 90s, and so we were just good friends with her and her family and got to know them and her other career as an artist and a photographer and a painter and all those things. But she had been to 20th Century Fox looking for pictures of herself from The Sound of Music, and she had been in the archive, and that's where she found continuity photos of herself from the movie. And she thought it was a great idea about, what if there was a book that was kind of dedicated to that? So she knew it was a big, big project to bite into. She called me one day in early 2011 and asked me to collaborate on this project with her, and that was also kismet. Use that word a second time. It was just this wonderful, wonderful moment, and she knew that I was a movie nerd. She knew that I'm a facts and figures and statistics kind of person. I know movies. I know movie actors. I'm very good with names and dates. I'm kind of like an IMDb up here in my head. I've always been that way. When I was a little kid, quick side story, I used to love to read the TV guide, the old TV guide, where they
Mhm.
had the listings and they listed all the actors' names and
yeah.
the guest stars.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, I loved TV Guide. I'm so sad that when they changed the format, I think it was in the late 90s, and it's like, oh, it's not what it used to be. But I'm just that guy who always was into actors, and she knew this, and she thought, well, yeah, if there's somebody who would be good for this project, it would be Tom. And so I said, yes, yes, let's go down this path. And so we we started in 2011, but we had to get Fox on board, and then we had to get a publisher on board, which was Inside Editions. And then we started work on the project we actually started going to the archive in, I think, November of 2012. And then the book first came out in hardcover in October of 2014. So in the scheme of things, it wasn't too long. It was a couple of years to put it all together. But yeah, about Fox, back to your original point there.
Mhm.
First, I miss 20th Century Fox Film Corporation.
Mhm.
The studio, as most everyone knows, no longer exists. There is still a Fox lot. That's not the Fox that everybody thinks of. Most of Fox was absorbed into Disney. So The Sound of Music and Miracle on 34th Street and all those great properties are now basically Disney, and they're probably on Disney Plus, as I say that out loud nowadays. But the old Fox, back in the good old days when my wife was working there, um, it was such a great lot. It's such a great environment. And the photo archive, oh my gosh, for fanboys like us, the photo archive has literally millions of images, most of which have never been seen by the public. Sure, there's some publicity photos in there, but there's also stuff that's never been seen. So you go into the actual archive and it's on rolling stacks like in a major library. So you walk in this temperature controlled room and they've got the rollers and so they can unroll the stacks and separate them. And when they separate their shelves floor to ceiling of boxes by each movie. So it's computerized so they know how to find the box for, the Pleasure Seekers or whatever movie you're searching for. So it's all in there and it's all categorized and organized. And so I was basically able to go through and pick the movies and the movie stars I wanted. I had to make sure that we had legal clearance that we could use those photographs. So it did have to be cleared by the legal team at Fox. In some cases, we had to go to the actors for special approvals.
Right.
Um, but it all just magically kind of came together, and it was the tip of this massive iceberg. I mean, everybody would love to go into this archive if you love movies and movie actors because it's just an unlimited supply. Our book, which I wasn't sure if you were going to ask me about the book or not, so I actually brought it in here with me. This
Oh,
is
nice.
the hardcover, it weighs 5 pounds.
Oh, wow, that book is huge.
Oh,
Yeah, this is this hardcover, which is now completely sold out and out of print. Weighs five
Oh,
pounds, and it's quite a treasure. And that's obviously a continuity photograph of Marilyn Monroe on the cover. So our focus in this book was primarily on continuity photos for the hair, makeup, and wardrobe departments. And most of those photos were not intended for public viewing. They were intended for use by the departments in question. So they were test photos. They wanted to see how the hair curls looked. They wanted to see how the brooch looked. So they did these photos, and some of them have leaked out certainly over time. All fans have found pictures of Marilyn Monroe where she's got the little chalkboard placard next to her, and those were stolen from Fox, to be quite frank, and leaked, and so they're everywhere. But most of the photos in the book, yeah, were never seen before, and we have some other behind the scenes photos that do have a theme of hair, makeup, and wardrobe. So whether it's Clark Gable combing his hair or Maureen O'Hara putting lipstick on it, we've got just a treasure trove of photos. And if you have a favorite movie star from this era, which was really covering the late 30s to the early 70s, odds are they're in the book. So all of my parents' favorites, John Wayne, Errol Flynn, Barbara Stanwyck, Betty Davis, Clark Gable, Ingrid Bergman, moving up into more contemporary times, more my era with Robert Redford and Warren Beatty, Anne Margaret, Raquel Welch, Farrah Fawcett. They're all in there. I mean, one of the joys of doing this book for me was that I could get all my favorites in the book. And you will see a TV influence because, as I said, I'm part of the TV generation. So you will see certain actors in there that may surprise you a little bit. I mean, certainly that's why Farrah Fawcett's in the book because I grew up with Charlie's Angels and she was in Myra Breckenridge with Raquel Welch and Mae West. So all three of them ended up being in the book for that reason. But as one little example, I grew up on Batman. I loved Batman too. I loved those reruns. And so we have Frank Gorshin and Julie Newmar in the book. And with Julie Newmar, it was particularly cool because I knew I know a lot about her career because I'm a big fan. And she started as a dancer primarily, and she was a featured dancer in a lot of feature films. And she was in Demetrius and the Gladiators with Susan Hayward. She was a featured dancer in that film. And I
oh,
said
wow.
to Angela and Jeff Thompson, who was the archivist who was helping us dig through these boxes, I said, let's see if there's a continuity picture of Julie Newmar just as a dancer. And lo and behold, we actually found it. I was stunned. So that's kind of a goosebump moment. It's like, I mean, talk about a picture that never would have been unearthed, never would have been seen. That's one of those examples. See, nowadays, the archive. I was just actually sharing an email with, or going back and forth an email with Angela about this, about whatever happened now that Fox is part of Disney, and I think the photo archive has moved off the Fox lot. I'm not certain, but I think it's moved. And basically anything that was a 20th Century Fox film, those boxes, and thousands of boxes. They're now owned by Disney. So I think they've moved probably over to Disney's storage area. And what will Disney do with them? I'm I don't know. I mean, there were still some photos of the Fox lot itself, of the buildings, and I think that was retained by the what I call the new Fox, what my wife Mary calls the new Fox, which is still Rupert Murdoch's company. So they probably kept a small amount of photographs, but not of the movies and not of the actors. So it's all with Disney. And let me tell you, this Styling the Stars, it could have been a series of books because of the millions of images. I mean, there's Cary Grant on the back in a bathing suit. It could have been so many books, and I don't think Disney, will care to continue it. It's such a shame, because the
Yeah.
book was done in both hardcover and softcover. But I was just about to announce on Facebook I was going to do a little video, which I'll probably do in the next week or two, and they're sold out and out of print. So the book is now a collector's item. You can still find it through secondhand sellers, but you can't just go to Amazon and get a brand new copy anymore, which is so bittersweet. I'm thrilled that it won a lot of awards, and it was bought by so many people, and it's in so many people's personal libraries. That means so much to me, from movie fan to movie fan. But I'm sad that the book is hard to find. So if you guys have never heard of the book and you were looking for it, it's like it's harder to find now, but you can certainly, eBay and the Amazon marketplace. And I have a few copies that I may part with at some point, that I've got my own little storage unit. But long story short, very long. I know I was very long on that. I'm very proud of the book, and
You should
I
be.
am a
You,
movie
you
fan.
absolutely should be.
I'm a movie lover. I grew up, just one last quick anecdote. My mother loved movies and movie stars. And she had all these hardcover books in her library, the films of John Wayne, the films of Betty Davis, the talkies, all these Immortals of the Silver Screen, and all these great books that I still have in my library, actually, because they were hers. And I would spend a lot of time when I was a little boy just looking at them, paging through them. I was just fascinated and mesmerized by the movie stars. And
Of
so
course.
for full circle to
Yeah.
come around, and I get to have my own book as an older man now, it was this moment. I dug up a picture and put it on my social media just a couple days ago. It was September 17th of 2014 when I got my advance copy, and I that was a big moment in my life, to suddenly have this book in my hands, because it meant so much to me. It's another full circle moment, and it's the kind of book I would have bought if I had not done the book. I would have just bought it off Amazon if I seen it. It's like all those movie stars from the golden age. I'm
Right.
in.
Mhm.
I don't think that you can even be a true sci-fi fan like we are without having some great love of the movies. And I say it all the time when we're doing our normal format, which is reviewing episodes of Star Trek in order of release.
Yes.
One of the things
Mhm.
about the TOS that really excited me is it always felt like a stage production. The sets were kind of basic, especially the planetary scenes. It felt like sitting in a theater watching this happen on stage, not so much watching it on my TV. And that's what, as a kid, took me away. So yes, these kinds of going back, all those movies, John Wayne, like you said, Marilyn Monroe, all these great actors and actresses, these are the movies I grew up on with my parents because we didn't have cable back then. We wasn't even a thing. You
Yeah.
talk about Blockbuster. My birthday parties was my dad renting a VHS recorder, and it comes in a big giant like case that you can't take it out of. It's like this. It was insane, but yeah, you say it's so cool, to go through stuff as an older man. I don't see an older man right now. I see a giddy. I see a giddy kid who's very excited about
Yeah,
all of the
absolutely.
things that you've dealt with, and these are huge accomplishments that you should absolutely be proud of, and never ever sell yourself short on that.
Well, I just have the stardust in my eyes, and I love what how you just described it. I never thought of it that way, about those old TV shows being like a stage play. That's a good point. Because maybe for
Mhm.
children's minds, we could wrap our minds around that almost easier than these CGI'd sets that we see nowadays, and people leaping off of buildings. And it's like, no, that was a sound stage and that was a set. And whether it's, yeah, the bridge of the Enterprise or the bridge of the Jupiter 2, it's like we could maybe, picture ourselves being there. It was more achievable
Yeah.
then. Yeah, it was a magical, magical time. I'm very loyal to the past. I hate to be that old guy, but it's like I do miss the past in many respects, and that's why as we talk about genre stuff, and as I got a little older and I got into my teens and my 20s, I found that I did gravitate more towards sci-fi and horror. And I'm very, very loyal to low budget horror movies from the 70s and 80s. And you look back at those films and it wasn't CGI heavy. It was mainly
Yes.
practical effects. It was more about the actors and the concept. And it
Exactly.
was all, minimal by today's standards, but those movies have a charm. There's something about them that just captures my mind. I guess it came at the right time in the right space for me at that age. Because I know that there's people who are who were very little like when, for example, Gremlins and the original Beetlejuice came out, and they love, love, love those movies. Now, if you never saw them and you go back and you see them for the first time, like nowadays as a 50-year-old person, it's not going to have the same impact that it did on that 10-year-old boy or girl when they
Right.
first saw it back in the
Yeah.
1980s. So we all are a function of our age and seeing things at a specific point in time. But the thing about our generation, all three of us here, is that we're loyal, and that's why these projects live on and on and on. I mean, in my movie, which I just produced with my wife, which I'm sure we'll talk about that shortly. Um, one of the actors in it is Linda Day George, who is a friend and one of my all-time favorite actresses. And Linda, we brought her back to feature films, and Linda is best known from the original Mission Impossible TV series, of course, and a
Yeah, she's
ton of
been gone from
Mhm.
acting for a
Yeah.
long time
a
before they
long
brought her
time.
back.
Her
Yeah.
last appearance was in 1989
Hmm.
when she did an episode reprising her role as Casey in an episode of there was a revival Mission Impossible TV series. There was a writer's strike, I think it was, in the late 80s. And so they started bringing back some old scripts from Mission Impossible, and they brought Peter Graves back as a series regular. But then they sprinkled in Greg Morris for 2 episodes, I believe, and then Linda did 1 episode, which was such a great, great moment in time. But Linda's been gone since 1989 from film and television.
Right.
Um, but she's a dear friend, a wonderful lady. Can't say enough nice things about her, and we got her to come back and be in our movie. But the reason I brought Linda up is Linda is perhaps, in addition to Mission Impossible, best known as kind of a cult horror movie actress.
Hmm.
In the late 70s and
Mhm.
early 80s, she and her
Yeah.
husband Christopher George, they appeared in Day of the Animals, Mortuary, Pieces. Now these are lower budget feature films.
Mhm.
These are not, big budget studio feature films. But let me tell you, Day of the Animals, Mortuary, and Pieces, they live forever. They are constantly being reissued on DVD and Blu-ray by various companies all over the world. They're on streaming platforms. So these little movies from the 80s are still accessible and they still have a loyal cult fan base. So whoever thought probably when they were filming Mortuary in 1980, I think they filmed it in 81, it was released in 80, was it 82 or early 83? I know it was released in Detroit in the fall of 83. I remember that vividly because Mortuary and Pieces were playing at the same complex at the same time. It was a Linda Day George, Christopher George, a double bill. But this movie, I mean, they probably never guessed that we'd be talking about it 40 years later. And I just saw that it's a UK company putting out a Blu-ray. I mean, it's been on Blu-ray by so many companies in so many countries. It just lives forever. And you compare that. Let's compare that moment with Christopher and Linda Day George in Mortuary to, say, Goldie Hawn. I love Goldie Hawn. I'm a big fan of Goldie Hawn. She did a number of comedies, big budget comedies for Warner Brothers in the 1980s.
Right.
Private Benjamin,
Mhm. Yeah.
Best Friends, Protocol, Swing Shift. None of those big budget Warner Brothers studio feature films are available on Blu-ray. None of them. But Mortuary and Pieces, Day of the Animals, they are available on Blu-ray. So that just shows the power of this fan base for genre projects. And they live on and on and on. And as an actor, trust me, I said this at the very
Mhm.
beginning. If I love to be in a horror movie. If somebody offers me a horror movie, 99% of the time, I'm going to say yes. Also, a Christmas movie because they also have longevity. So if you can get into something that's got that loyal fan base, it's just, it becomes,
Yeah,
something that you can carry with you forever. And isn't that
yeah,
kind of a great thing?
yeah, absolutely. I think the my opinion is that the main differences from movies and television shows from that era versus the CGI
Right?
is that then it focused more on the story and the actors and just actually getting what if they had a message or just actually just wanting to tell that story.
Yes.
That's what was more important. That's what was more focused on. And that's to me is that's what's more important than seeing CGI. I mean, don't get me wrong, I do love the Captain Americas and the Avengers and all that and seeing
We
all
all love our
the CGI,
effects.
the fights and all that stuff. It's all great, you know. But if I get a really, really good sci-fi story or good horror story, or even just a good just a drama story in general, I
Yeah.
gravitate more towards that
Yeah.
than I do with just seeing the action. Because I mean, action is action, and you can get action just
You
in
can
any
get it.
movie.
You can get it anywhere. And
I
just to
Yeah,
reinforce that point, going back to like the old Star Trek's being like a stage production, watch some of the monologues. We can make jokes about how the show is kind of corny or hokey at some points, but watch some of the monologues and you watch the other actors in the scene, they all stand perfectly still, like they would on a stage production, leaving the
yeah.
focus on the person who's giving the monologue
Yeah.
of that
mm.
particular scene so as not to take away from it. Whereas now there's so much going on in a movie scene. You have to
Where
watch it
it's
seven
actually
times to keep up with to find
yeah,
everything that's
because
going
there's so
on.
much that's happening in the background
Hmm.
That's so
that
true.
you have to watch once to see the main part of it. Then you have to watch it again to see what's happening in this side of it. Then you have to watch it again to see something in this corner. Watch it again, see what's happening in this corner, and it's too much to take in.
It's a lot, especially for us ADHD people that are all over the place. Kind of.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like,
I think
oh, wait.
the example that comes to my mind, I do love the Alien franchise, and I enjoyed Alien Romulus. I thought it was a great film, but I still will say that the original 1979 Alien is still my favorite of the franchise, and I believe that's because there was less going on. We could focus on the story. We could focus on those actors. Why are those actors so memorable? Why are they all so firmly etched in our minds? Because for those who love Alien, you know Harry Dean Stanton in that movie. You know Veronica Cartwright in that movie. You know all those people. You feel like you know them, right? They
Mhm.
had that kind of impact. But on Alien Romulus, I thought it was a great film, but I'm not sure, 40 years from now, are the actors in that movie going to be as firmly etched in everyone's mind as those original Alien actors were? Because, Romulus certainly had, great special effects and CGI and gore and God, there's a lot going on there, right?
Right,
But
right.
will you
Right?
remember
Yeah.
those actors, 10, 20, 30, 40 years, the same way you remember Sigourney Weaver? Do we have a new Sigourney Weaver out of any of those Alien movies?
No.
Mhm.
In my opinion, no offense to anybody, is no, I don't think we do. I think Sigourney and those original actors created this crew of actors that we will
And
never forget them.
the intimacy of the scenes. I would compare it to, think about the most famous scene from Alien, the dinner scene. When we first get the chest burster and we see all that, equate that scene. It's very intimate. You have some friends, you believe that they work together, that they've been on this ship for a long time together in a very kind of claustrophobic small environment. But then compare it
Right.
to, I don't know which one it was it Alien 3 or Alien Resurrection, where you had like the cafeteria, the mess hall scene. It was
Hmm.
much bigger
Yep.
and wider, and it didn't have that terror that would happen if this happened in my tiny little kitchen in my 700 square foot apartment. You know what I mean? So
Right.
it's
Well,
very different versus being in a school cafeteria. or a prison cafeteria, something like that. So
Well, yeah, exactly. Just I mean, and how many times have just all of us have been in just in situations like that, just in an intimate setting with you and like two or three other, friends,
right.
and you're just sitting around the table, just eating and just talking smack to each other, just and then all of a sudden, then hey, hey, Roy over here, all of a sudden it's just, oh my God, what the hell's going on? Boom, and then yeah, we've all been in kind of situations like that when we've been in close intimate situations, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, so we can relate to that.
Yeah.
And so
I love the
it's stuff like
conversation.
that we can relate, even though I don't know about either one of you. I've never been in a spaceship, on the other side of
No,
the galaxy
not
with a
yet.
bloodthirsty alien
Not
coming
yet.
after
Not
me.
yet.
I've
Not yet.
never been in that situation. Um, but I
No,
have been in situations where I've sat, in intimate roundtable settings with people.
I love this conversation because as I was thinking about sitting down and chatting with the two of you, and I knew we were going to talk about showbiz fun stuff together like this, it's like it's hard for me to often articulate about why some of these projects from the past resonate. And the claustrophobic nature of genre projects is very important. Actually, I never really thought of it that way, and it does focus your attention, and and maybe that's part of it. I mean, that's why I think I will always be partial to low budget projects. I do tend to gravitate towards the smaller, more intimate movie where it's character driven and actor driven and story driven. I mean, I love a good, big budget Marvel movie as much as everyone does. It's not the top of my list, but I've certainly enjoyed a lot of them. But I tend to gravitate towards the smaller film, and Hollywood's changed tremendously in the past couple of decades, and it's hard for these little films to get out there and find their audience. The grand old days of what we were talking about, kind of the early or not early, but the golden age of horror, which a lot of people think is the late 70s through the 1980s. Back then movies they did get a theatrical release and they ended up on the drive-in circuit as well. So you take a movie like Mortuary or Pieces, which I was talking about earlier, and those were released wide nationally, played in theaters, played in drive-ins, and then very quickly, with a 6 or 9 month window, I can't remember what it was, ended up in video stores and then Blockbuster became a big thing, and then the audience grew and grew and grew. But you see how a little film got seen by so many people. Nowadays, the little movies, wow, you've got to really compete. You're trying to get on the streaming platforms. You can get on Amazon and you're competing with a million other movies. So
The
how do you
tools are there for
differentiate?
everybody.
Right? Yeah.
It's hard. So um, we definitely don't want to miss out on talking about Helios, but this kind of like leads into the other project, which my wife and I produce because we're low budget feature film producers.
And that's what I
So,
wanted to talk about. That's what I wanted to talk about next before we get to the Helios
oh,
stuff,
good. Okay.
because
Yeah.
you do have an upcoming project.
I do.
And yeah, and I'm kind of
Yes.
I want to hear about this. So
Well,
we'll talk about.
actually, we'll call it two upcoming projects then. Let's
Okay,
actually start with Helios,
okay,
for my friends
All
on
right.
that. Helios
sure.
is, which you guys are very familiar with, and hopefully
Very.
everyone will be familiar with soon, is a wonderful post-apocalyptic audio drama series. I first met Steve and company. This goes way back. I met them in 2015 at a digital conference. They were just starting to shop the Helios property at that time, and I was there at the conference because I was in a movie called Expelled, which was a big digital hit for awesomeness. And they were there for Helios. And I remember in the program or on the website, they were talking about a space opera. And they mentioned Space 1999 and Christopher Penfold. Christopher was one of the genius creatives behind Space 1999, primarily more year one than year two. Christopher unfortunately just recently passed away a few weeks ago. He's such a wonderful, wonderful, great man. But when Mary and I saw this, we're like, oh, space opera? Are we talking like Space 1999, Star Trek, and Lost in Space? And then I knew Christopher Penfold's name, and I'm like, we have to do a meeting with these people. So we sat down with them, and we kind of heard the pitch, and we're like, okay, this sounds great. We're totally on board. The project was initially shopped as a TV series, but that's a hard path to take in the current industry. You need a named showrunner. Um, it's better if you do have a known franchise. It's really hard to get a series rolling unless you're Greg Berlanti or Ryan Murphy or someone like that. It's very, very hard. Ultimately, over time, Steve decided to do it as an audio drama series. So we recorded this last year in the spring of 23. And to mention the wonderful people behind the camera or behind the microphone in this case, there's Steve Warnick, Robert Wood, Tammy Klein, Glenn Campbell. They were all great people that I worked with. The actors include Cindy Dolans and the great Nick Tate. Anthony Montgomery is also in it, but I did not actually work with him, but I've met Anthony many times. We crossed paths. I just had, an incredible pinch me moment when I'm standing at the microphone next to Nick Tate. I've been lucky to work with a lot of idols from my childhood.
Space
I couldn't,
1999, no less.
Right?
I know, I
Absolutely.
couldn't quite believe that I'm standing next to Nick Tate because he's got that, great voice. And of course he's Nick Tate. But I mean, what a wonderful, wonderful project.
Perfect narrator for this show.
Oh God, yeah.
Right.
Well, he was,
Absolutely.
he was the voiceover guy for trailers. He did tons of trailer voiceovers. You may not have known that's his voice, but he was the go-to guy for so long and everyone knows his voice at least by sound, but they may not know that was actually Nick Tate.
I didn't know that Ving Rhames was the We Have the Meats guy from Arby's. So hey,
I know.
the things you learn. But I mean, also, you've got other Star Trek alum with Colin Trenier, Dominic Keating. I mean,
Yeah,
what a fantastic cast
yeah.
that Steve and crew was able to put together for this project.
We're very, very
Yeah.
excited.
Oh,
It's got a great story, and we're hoping that there'll be future installments. I have a supporting part in this first batch of episodes that are coming out. I play a character named Tom appropriately, and I'm separated from my wife Jess, who's played by Cindy Dolan. And my character is a bit of a mystery man. He has an interesting backstory, which has not yet been revealed. So he's kind of one of those subject to interpretation kind of guys. It's like, why are they separated? How is he involved in the business of what's happened? He loves his daughter. What really happened there? So it's not revealed yet at this point. So people can kind of wonder, is he a good guy? Is he a bad guy? What is this guy? So it's an interesting character, and yeah, I'm keeping my fingers crossed that Helios will go on and on. As I said earlier, hopefully it'll come out later this year, and I know Steve and company are going to give it a big launch, and hopefully it'll get connected into the sci-fi community. I just saw on Facebook, I think Space 1999 is going to have more 50th anniversary celebrations next year. So hopefully there'll be more opportunities to get the word out there. There may be a convention I read in Los Angeles, probably next September, a year from now. So
If there is some literature or something we can get a hold of, a friend of mine and I are going to be going to GalaxyCon here in Columbus in December. We'd
ah,
love to pass out some literature and just say, hey, check out this project that's coming out. So we'd be happy to do
yes.
that at no cost, just because we're going to be there. My sole goal is to meet George Takei for the second time since 1986. Be like, you don't
Ah,
remember me? You don't remember me? I was 12, but I remember you. I was also a boy, so deal with that one. But anyway,
I looked a little different back then.
looked a little
uh,
different back then. But
George will
anyway,
probably go, "Oh, I remember you." No,
can't wait. But
they're such wonderful people. I was fortunate that I did get to meet Nichelle Nichols just before COVID lockdown, right before that, and she, of course, ended up going off the convention circuit. But Nichelle was so wonderful; she was just a sweetheart, and I'm so glad I had that moment with those people. I'm very loyal to those Star Trek actors. There's not many left.
no,
We have William
Yeah.
Shatner, George, and Walter of the series regulars, and it's so sad that we don't have as many left as we used to.
It's
But yes, yeah, I'll talk to Steve about that because yeah, I think that the convention circuit is so important, and because we have Nick Tate, and there's all these connections to Space 1999, and of course, Steve is tied to Star Trek as well. As I was telling him, I mean, you've got ties to Star Trek Lost in Space and Space 1999 with this audio drama series, so tap into that and see where it leads.
absolutely we would love to help
Yeah.
promote that. And when it comes to like the Star Trek actors that we've lost and we still have, sort of one of our running themes on the show every time we review an episode, I pick an actor or a crew member, cast member who has passed away. And unfortunately, it's not been hard to do with, the original
So with the
series.
original,
So
yeah.
especially
I know
when they're
it's
large
so
name
sad. Our
actors.
our generation has to kind of absorb that because there's still, there's still a lot of people around from those favorite shows we had from our childhood. But when I realized, Tina Louise is the only Gilligan's Island member still with us, I mean, it's like, wow, now, how can that be? But there's still a lot of people who are going strong. Barbara Bain from Space 1999 and Mission Impossible is in her
Mhm.
90s, and she's still going strong. I met her again. I've met her a few times. I met her last year, and she's sharp as a tack and funny and lively, and she's an angel, and she's wonderful. And I just saw she's directing a play in West Hollywood right now in the month of September 24. So she's still active, and I think she was born in 1931, I think. So
Yeah.
she's 93 years old and she's still directing a stage play. I mean, we should all
Wow.
be like that. I mean, go Barbara Bain. Wow.
Now, shout out to my
Yeah.
grandmother who's 95, 96. Only recently had to stop going dancing with her girlfriends every Saturday night. So,
Oh,
hey, if you can keep doing it, keep doing it. But
keep
but
doing
that's
it.
Right.
absolutely
Yeah.
awesome. So, what is the work environment like when you're doing it? Do you guys all meet in a sound? You said you haven't worked with everyone personally. So, like, do you record your parts individually? How's that work when you do that?
For Helios, what
Yeah.
they did is they did it over a period of a few days, and because there were several episodes, and I think, don't quote me on this, but I think it all adds up to probably be around a 2 hour thing if you were to do it continuous. So they filmed it over
Okay.
several days. And they basically brought in the actors, and you were working with the actors who were in the scene that you were in. So I shared
Okay.
scenes with Cindy and Nick Tate, um, but I did not share any scenes with Anthony or the other actors. So it kind of it
Oh,
depended on your character and who you were actually going to work with. Yeah, they didn't do it. I think I know what you're thinking of. It. They didn't do it kind of staged reading style where we're all kind of up there with the microphones, the way you would do a live performance. So they kind of did it piece by piece, and then they I know they did some re-recording on it. I had to go back and do some re-recording, which I ended up going back. Yeah, just by myself on that one. There was um, a little recording booth that Tammy and Glenn had access to, and so I kind of went in and did my part there. But I know that yeah, they were bringing people in as recent as last month to do a few little fixes, a few little tweaks. So it's a
okay.
luxury, maybe to answer your question better, if you get to actually work with the people that you're in the scene with, because I think a lot of animated projects, including what will be 3D animation, as we were talking about, a lot of stuff's recorded in isolation. You're not there with the other actors, and so it's unfortunate because, in my mind, in my opinion, there's no substitute for that live chemistry that you feel. It's really, from my view, a challenge to go in and do something and have it sliced into something else. So, it's better as if I were doing my own audio drama series or my own podcast series, I would always try to get the actors together because there's an unmistakable magic which you can't duplicate when people are isolated. You get a good actor, they'll still always do a good performance. I mean, Meryl Streep is Meryl Streep is Meryl Streep, right?
Right.
But
Yeah.
for the magic of what might happen, that's like filming my feature film, which we'll talk about shortly, is the you never know what's going to happen until it happens, and sometimes it depends on the actors that you're working with, and you just get this moment that you can't duplicate ever again. And that's the fun of the creativity of the business is when it all gels. I love that.
And that's why I wanted to ask because, I mean, it's still to this day, having known this for years, blows me away, even in a major film production, that Shatner and Montalban never interacted in Star Trek 2. They were working with people just reading the other characters' lines, but yet when you watch the movie, you're like, they have to be interact. They have to be. They're
It's like, I
playing
mean,
off of each other. They're
like you
playing
would
off each
think,
other right now.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would think that, yeah, I mean, they're not in the same scene, but I mean, they got to be there.
I know.
Somebody's got to be there.
What,
Like, they got to
what,
be there.
what they really should have is the reader for them should be an actor, someone who can actually kind of deliver the emotion and then the context and all that. If you're, I mean, I've had this happen on certain projects where the lines are just being read by a crew member who's not an actor and has no interest in being an actor, and they just read them very flat and boring, like monotone, like this. And it's really hard to then work opposite that. It's a challenge because they're not giving you anything. This is what auditioning was like when it was in person. Auditioning has kind of changed to be all digital now. It's all done from a remote location, and you don't get to work with actors and casting directors anymore. Don't get me started on that subject. But auditions used to be in person, and you were typically reading with a casting associate, and they're just kind of sitting over there, fixing their nails, having a drink of coffee, and reading their lines about as flat as you can. I love you. I love you. What do you love me? And then you got to do something with that. And so, that's, a skill set in and of itself. If you
It
want to be
sounds
an actor, you've got to have skills for auditioning, being in class, being on a professional set, different skill sets for different things. So yeah,
frustrating. It sounds frustrating.
oh, it is. It is. So hopefully with Shatner and Montalban, hopefully they had somebody real helping them because I would be surprised if actors of that caliber would put up with that kind of, second AD reading the lines flat or the supervisor reading the lines
I
flat.
couldn't imagine some cast or, some stagehand or something sitting there going, I've done far worse than kill you. I've hurt you. And I wish to go on hurting you. Like, no, don't put any feeling into it.
So,
No,
con.
there was some
Yeah.
story between one of the actors.
Like, I could just see projecting. I just go, con.
No, there was some movie, and I'm trying to think who this actor was, and he was doing a scene in the movie, and he was going to have to he was going to have to be opposite an actor who had one line, and he insisted that that be a SAG-AFTRA actor because often the one-line parts they'll often go to like a friend of the producer, or the crew member who just so happens to be standing there at the time, and they'll just throw that one line to that person. And this, I can't remember the name of this actor, but he was an A-lister, and he said, "No, no, no, I insist that that be a SAG-AFTRA actor that I'm working opposite because I want someone who's experienced, who can act." And he felt that he needed that kind of combination to create the magic. So if you're an A-lister, you've got the clout to probably demand something like that. For the rest of us, you kind of get what you get, but as a producer and filmmaker, I lean towards let's not leave this to chance and fate. Let's create the right environment and let's do this the proper way. And I'm very serious about filmmaking, and I have a strong opinion.
Yeah. No, I can understand that.
Yeah.
I'm just a small time TikTok creator, and I can understand sort of the methodology of method acting. If I'm going to do a TikTok, I'm like, oh, I got a great idea, but I got to be energetic first. I'm going to jump around and kind of get myself all frazzled up, tousle the hair a bit before I jump into it, especially if I'm doing like a anxiety driven ADHD rant or something. You got to get into it. You can't just get there and be like, hi, I like chocolate milk.
Yeah.
Today is Tuesday.
Uh, yeah.
Yeah.
Whatever.
And so I totally get it because with recording, voices and with doing the animation, is that I've seen because I saw a video with Seth MacFarlane where he was describing how he recorded an episode of Family Guy. And he said for the most part that when the actors they come in individually and just get in the booth by themselves.
Yeah.
And sometimes every now and again they'll have somebody else there to to kind of be there on the scene with them.
Right.
To me, it seems like it would be kind of depending on how good you are and whatnot, you know, getting that that range of emotion and trying to imagine the person that you're talking to give you a certain range of emotion back to you so you can feed off of that. It's very difficult.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so yeah, I could definitely see the advantage of being in a scene with someone
Yeah.
and actually, being, going back
We froze a little bit.
and you feed back to them and you can kind of go off of that and create that magic.
Yeah. I think
Again, they're
like the
feeding off each
Simpsons
other.
actors, they're all so wonderful and they've been doing it for so long that I can certainly understand that they could probably just, go in the booth by themselves and they know those characters inside and
Mhm.
out and they can just do it. I mean, it's part of their life now, right? I mean, doing it for
Right.
decades. But yeah, something that's newer or a guest actor that comes in, it's just an extra layer of complication. It's just an additional
Mhm.
challenge. I mean, as actors, we have to, be prepared for any situation. We have to, I always kind of figured, I always prepare for the worst, put it that way. And I'm like, okay, I've been on some difficult sets, certainly. I've been in some difficult situations, and what I typically do as an actor is like, okay, this is going on around me. Let me put my blinders, and I'm just going to focus on my job. And I don't care what's going on and who's fighting with who and who's yelling and who's screaming. And I've got a job to do, and it's being immortalized in film, and it's going to live forever in theory. And so I'm going to give it 100%. And that's part of the challenge is blocking out the noise because you don't know what you're going to get when you get on any project. You hope that you're going to get along with everybody and everybody's going to be professional and everybody's going to know their job. Doesn't happen all the time. I've been on a variety of projects. Anybody who checks me out from listening to this podcast, I've been in a lot of low budget projects. I've been in some higher budget projects. I was in Exorcism of Molly Hartley opposite Devon Sawa, and Santa's Little Helper opposite Mike the Miz Mizanin, and Expelled opposite Cameron Dallas. But I've been in a lot of low budget feature films too. And these are, projects where the budget was less than $25,000 in a few examples. That's about as rustic as it gets. That
Oh,
means,
right.
I'm changing clothes in the public bathroom at the restaurant that we're shooting at, or I'm changing in my car. You may or may not have a place to sit down. You may or may not get fed. They're usually pretty good about feeding you. Everybody knows the 6 hour rule, but you kind of get what you get, and you do it for the love of acting. And when I became an actor I started acting in February of 2012 with a Toyota commercial, and it kind of snowballed from there. And I worked so much in the 2010s, and I'm so grateful, and I love the challenge of creating a character that's completely different from me. Um, it's a tremendous challenge to make it believable and real. I don't subscribe to any one acting technique. I don't I don't use the method, and I don't use anything specifically like that. For me, it's the only way I can describe it is I have to believe I'm that character. I have to believe I'm in that situation,
Mhm.
and I have to believe the actors I'm working with are actually who they're playing. So if it's real to me, hopefully it translates on screen. It's real to the people watching it. But the one caution that I throw into that is you need to make sure every single second you're on screen that you know who you are. So it's a challenge when you step into like a one or two scene part because you don't have a tremendous arc and a tremendous backstory. You're kind of there for a purpose to move a scene along or move the project along somehow, some way. And so you go in and you create your character. You go in, you get out. That's a challenge in and of itself, being like in more the guest star kind of actor. But when you're a lead, then it's a tremendous responsibility. You need to know exactly who you are every single second. If you don't, the audience will sense that, and then the picture, you're screwed. I mean, this is a wonderful segue into the movie that we produced. But when we were talking about doing a movie, I remember one person said something to me and it really, really stuck. And this person said, you know, if your actors are shit, then your movie is shit. So you got to focus on the actors, you got to focus on the acting because that's what's going to carry the audience through. If we, you know, we did a low budget movie. I'll describe it here for you in a little more detail. But basically, in a low budget environment, I don't have, you know, anybody jumping off a building. I don't have CGI. I don't have a pack of wolves chasing me. I don't have the benefit of exotic locations and these wonderful crane shots where they start on the roof and they come down to the sidewalk. I don't have the benefit of that. So, what what has to sell my movie is the actors. And if the audience likes the actors, then the movie will be successful. So, so the segue here is my wife Mary and I have our own production company called Next Chapter Entertainment, which
Okay.
we created a few years ago. We started this company really to do low budget feature film production. COVID lockdown sent us down a couple other paths while we were in development on various projects, and we did some book publishing. We published a couple Lost in Space related books. My wife did some kind of special project boutique talent management, and we did a variety of things, but we were developing this project all along. And we had an original pitch from our screenwriter Jeremy Padow, and it sounded very promising, and we kind of went with it. And the movie evolved over a period of a couple years, and we shot this movie in principal photography last year during April and May of 23. We started post a couple months later. It's now fast forward 1 year. We're still in post production. We're still working on it. We did some reshoots and pickups in February. We did some more inserts in August. It's Mount Everest is what I call this project. So the film is currently titled Mr. Christmas. When we filmed it, we called it the Untitled Dark Christmas Comedy. It's a dark comedy with a twist. It's basically the story of Ralph, who is me. Ralph is this seemingly ordinary everyman, a husband and a father, who loves his family and loves Christmas, and for him they're intertwined. And that's a simple life that he's had forever. He doesn't want anything else. His wife leaves him after 20 years. She can't take his quirks anymore. His world falls apart. He just wants his family and this Christmas daily life that he lives. He wants it all back. So he hatches an elaborate plot to bring it all back. And it's a roller coaster ride. And it spirals and spirals and spirals. I believe we have a very unique film with a surprise twist here and there. We cross genres. There's great comedy, there's drama, there's emotion, there's thrills, there's scares. It's a little bit of everything.
I was
So
gonna say, I saw in one of
Nice.
the descriptions, did I see the word horror?
you
Somewhat.
you probably did, yes. You know, when Mary and I started Next Chapter Entertainment, you know, our first request when we were talking to screenwriters was we were going to do a low budget horror movie, and that's because I love horror certainly, but I know it has the
Right,
royal cult audience that I've said 50 million times already in this
right.
podcast. But it's also got international marketing appeal. A horror film is a smart film to do, especially if you've got a low budget. So that was our initial thought, and we, you know, this is a whole other conversation, which I probably won't give you the long version of. It was very hard to find a screenwriter, very hard, and I was surprised by that because the people we talked to, we told them up front, we're fully funded. Mary and I funded this project from our own bank account,
Wow.
so
Okay.
we're a go. So we just gave very broad parameters. I said, you know, we wanted to do initially the first couple of people we said we're preferring a low budget horror movie, but we expanded that. We said we just want to do a low budget movie, leaning more towards comedy than drama because drama is a little harder sell when you don't have a name actor anchoring it. Um, and we wanted the primary lead role to be appropriate to me. So we gave them two very broad parameters, but most of the writers they didn't want they just wanted to pedal off the scripts that they'd already written. They should have been enticed by the fact that we were fully funded because if you're a talented screenwriter, and I'm saying this out loud for any screenwriters who may be listening, if you're talented, you'll get your scripts optioned. You can stack up your options and it looks great on paper, and I'm not putting that down. This is not a negative statement. This is the reality. It's great to have option scripts, but you need to get them produced. And they typically do not have the money and they just go into limbo. So this happens to so many people. They just stack up their option scripts. And the people try to search and find the money. And I would say over 90% of option scripts, probably more than that, probably over 95%, don't get made. There's no money to make them. So Mary and we did it the right way from our view, was that we had set aside this bucket of money at the very beginning. And so we were a go. So, so there was no ifs, ands, or buts. We optioned the script in August of 22. We went immediately into pre-production. So boom. So our path, took a few years, but it's not as long as most movies where something gets optioned 10 years ago and it's passed hands from this producer to this producer and nobody's, it started and it stopped and all that kind of crap. It's like we didn't go through that. We were a go from the very beginning. So horror is in the script because I love it, and it's more comedic, I'd say, in the first half and more dramatic in the second half, and it's quite a roller coaster. But I do have to name drop, if I may. Um,
Absolutely.
One of the things I'm most proud of in the movie, Mary and I did the casting ourselves. We did not give that to a third party person to do. We did it ourselves. The actors that we have in this movie are the best of the best. We have a cast of veteran household name actors. I'm so thrilled that they joined us on this project. I'm over the moon, and let me tell you, they're perfect. They're so talented. They're so perfect in their parts. I can't articulate it properly. So I'm the lead, but making me look good will be a cast of, and I'll name drop 10 or so people here. We have Charlie Schlaughter from Diagnosis Murder, Jill Sholin from The Stepfather, Casey Burke from The Middle, Landon Jimenez from Resurrection, Linda Day George from Mission Impossible. We have 3 actors from the original Lost in Space. We have Marta Kristen, Bill Mumy, and Angela Cartwright. We
Danger
have
Will
Nicole,
Robinson.
yes, Will Penny, and we have also Nicole Tom from The Nanny, Trevor Lasore from Sabrina the Teenage Witch, and Susan Blakely from Rich Man Poor Man. And we also just recently in post production we got and you're getting a little scoop here. This is one of these names I haven't announced, but we got some voice cameos from Anitra Ford, who is best known from the original Price is Right, but she was also an actress in the 70s in The Longest Yard with Burt Reynolds and
Yeah.
a whole bunch of great low budget movies, including Messiah of Evil, one of the great horror films of the 70s. And Judy Aronson, who is a friend of Jill Sholin, and she's best known from the Friday the 13th franchise. So Anitra and Judy came in and did little voice cameos for us as well. So we just have this eclectic cast. I'm so, so happy that they joined us. I pinched myself that we got all of these people because they're so good and they were all wonderful. There were no divas. There were no problems. The actors, like I said, best of the best. I love them. They're just wonderful, wonderful people. If you love any of those actors, wait till you see them in this movie. They're great.
No, you say you're in post production, and yeah, in regard to the actors, like even if you didn't know the names, just go to the IMDb, look up Mr. Christmas, and you're just scrolling through, like I know that one, I know them, I know them, I know her, I know him. It's like you can just see it scrolling through the list.
Right.
Fantastic. Now you say you're in post production. Um, any idea of a possible release? I know IMDb says 2024. But when it comes to release
Yeah.
dates, I don't always trust them.
Yeah,
So,
Yeah.
I know. It's funny you mentioned that because I actually was talking to Mary, and yesterday we put up that teaser poster and we cut out the bottom row, which said 2024. We originally had high hopes that we would make it up by the fourth quarter of 24. But what we found in post production was there were a lot of complications. And the good news is we overcame all the obstacles. But post was Mount Everest in and of itself. There were a lot of things that we had to kind of save and fix. But the good news is we were able to save things and fix things. And Mary and I are getting the creative vision that we had from the very beginning. This is very, very personal passion project for us, and we have a very strong opinion and a strong vision for how it should end up, and it takes time to realize that. So we're now at the stage where we're kind of getting other elements in, including the score and the sound, and then we have to ultimately move to the color correction and some minor visual effects. We've still got a tremendous amount to do, but I'm hopeful, fingers crossed, that we'll make it out by fourth quarter of 25. That's our goal. That's what we're aiming for. That's what we're going to strive for. It does depend on some factors that are outside of my control, but Mary and I really micromanaged the video edit. I mean, I literally went in and managed it second by second. It meant that much to me, and I had a crystal clear vision of this movie and the character of Ralph in particular. I'm in 99% of this movie. I mean, I'm in basically every single scene, and
Mhm.
I know Ralph inside and out. I love Ralph. Um, I feel I feel so attached to him. He's so important to me, and I want it done right. So we're spending longer in post than I anticipated, but I think it's all worth it. I will give you a scoop here, which I've not announced, and I'm probably not going to put this in social media for a couple of weeks. But the title of Mr. Christmas is very likely to change for long story reasons, which I won't get into. I'm 99% sure that the film is going to be retitled Ralph's Perfect Christmas, which is basically what the story is all about.
Right.
Ralph trying to
Yeah.
get this wonderful life, not to tie into It's a Wonderful Life. He's trying to get his wonderful life back together. So I think we're going to 99% sure we're going to change that. So anybody who's interested in the movie, um, you can certainly find it under my name, and it's currently Mr. Christmas, but it's very, very, very likely to be Ralph's Perfect Christmas. But you can also check out any of the actors which you may love or be a fan of from other projects, and you'll be able to find us and follow our journey. Hang in there. We're coming. It's taking a little time, but we'll make it. It's God, it's a dream come true to have something like this. I can't tell you how important it is to me. It is the single biggest and most important project that I will ever chew on, that I will ever attempt. And for Mary and I, it's this huge chunk of our life, and I words don't say it enough. I mean, it's a big deal for us, and we're busting our butts to make the best movie we can.
I think Gilbert and
Awesome.
I, Gilbert and I get that. I mean, and that was the wonderful thing about having Steve and you is that we've got these people with passion projects. I titled the episode with Steve "Labor of Love" because it's the work and passion going into that. I'm not as involved, but I'm contributing to a point. Gilbert even more so. But we're all building a radio station here. All the people that are putting shows on this radio station
Yeah.
and the different personalities and everyone involved in, whether it's my tiny way or Gilbert behind the scenes doing all the tech stuff. George, who's our go-to guy who made all this happen in the first place, getting us Chris Hunter and Steve on the show, which led to you on the show, possibly getting CJ and even some other people that we've talked about. But
Right. But yeah, just exactly that. Yeah, this whole thing, even this podcast, this is a passion project.
Yeah.
And just like how she said, the radio station with Thomas and Jeff, because those are my two bosses basically. So they're the ones that started it. And so everyone that all of us that contributed to it, between Gretchen and myself and Gambit, whenever he's on, you know, we all this is a this entire thing is a passion project. So yeah, we totally understand it, and yeah, we get it
You're both
and we
very
love it.
you're both very inspiring because you made it happen. And this is something that is within our control, is to kind of go for it. And there's an audience out there that wants to listen and wants to talk and have this kind of human interaction. And in today's world, everyone is tied to their phones, and everything's quick and fast. It's like what you were saying, Gretchen, earlier, and it's we're used to these little 30 seconds here, 30 seconds there, and one of the things that's happening in entertainment are these things called vertical short form series, which are basically like TikTok series that'll be like 1 minute long. And there's a bunch of platforms out there that are doing these really low budget projects right now. And it's like, okay, the attention spans are just shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. So, that's good and bad, but there's a huge audience with a big appetite, and so just reach those people and talk to them. And I didn't know the path that we were going to go on, and I find I'm so comfortable with the two of you. I could just sit here and talk to you for hours and hours and hours about so many things because it's fun to talk about dream projects and things that have influenced us. And it's going back to the nerd thing, it's great to be that person who gets excited about something. Don't be desensitized by politics, and it's an angry world out there in many respects, and you can become very jaded. And let's go back to some fun stuff that makes us happy, and
Right?
whether it's watching
Yeah.
an episode of Mirror Mirror on Star Trek the original series or something fun like that. Whether it's that or a podcast like this, it's like let's just breathe and have fun and have a happy part of each day. God, I sound like I'm I sound like I'm wrapping it up, which I'm not trying to wrap it up. It's just I just I think there's so much stress in the world that you two are letting us all sit down for an hour or so and just have fun talking, and that's a joy. So thank you.
Oh, no problem. And again, it's what me and Gilbert wanted to do in the beginning. It's just like we want to talk about Star Trek.
Yeah.
I know we can say there's thousands of Star Trek podcasts out there. And yes, for our regular listeners who are listening, we're altering our format up a little bit. We're adding other sci-fi shows. We're just as passionate about Battlestar Galactica and Stargate and all of these other shows that we've loved, and Helios too, bringing that into the fold. And it's just we just want to talk about this stuff. It's
Yeah.
Yeah.
in a
Because
world where everyone's for 15 seconds. It's like, no, I want to sit down and have a conversation.
yeah, because
The raw start of
like
conversation.
I like I said, we're nerds and we love sci-fi, and so what do we want to do? We love to talk about it.
Yeah.
We love to debate about certain things. Love to give us our top five, top 10 list of good guys, top 10 list of bad guys. Whatever the case may be. You know, we we love it. We love talking about it,
It's
and it is just it it's a thrill for us just to have you on here, Tom, and to be able just to talk with us about just sci-fi shows.
yeah. Yeah.
This is episode 25. And I tell you, when we started this, what, beginning of the year, probably late
But
February, March.
it's like
Okay.
yeah, February, March, around and then when we started.
Never,
Yes.
never in my wildest dreams thinking, in our first season, because we're sort of basing our seasons on the seasons we review, that we would have not one, but two, three, potentially four or five guests
All
in
right.
our first season, and people who are impactful and come from the same love of these types of shows and genres. I mean, Steve was just as excited to talk about his work on Star Trek as he was about
Yep. About
Helios.
Helios. Yeah.
How excited Chris was to talk about his dad, not
Yeah.
just on Star Trek, but hey, he was in a movie with John Wayne. Did you know he was in a movie with John Wayne? Like, no, I didn't know that, but now I do. And I see your joy in that. And that's fantastic. That's what we want to talk about.
Yeah. I'm
Yeah.
pretty
Because
sure Jeffrey Hunter actually is in my book Styling the Stars. I'm trying to remember which movie he's in there for.
I'm gonna have to
I
find
don't
me a
think it
copy of
might be,
this now.
was he in Love and War? I'd have to double check, but I'm pretty sure that he was, because he was a movie actor. And then everybody knows him from Star Trek, certainly. But he's got a long resume like everybody else. And, yeah, I'm sure, yeah, it would have been fun to. I'll have to listen to Chris's. I've listened to Steve's, and I really enjoyed it. I truly enjoyed it. I listened to the whole thing, beginning to end. So I think, there's a lot to talk about and chew on. And these projects, they just they mean something to a lot of people. And so it's always nice
Yeah,
to find somebody else that it means something to them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're just
yeah. Because
glad
I
that
mean, it, just going back, earlier in the conversation, we were talking about Blockbuster, which, funny enough, because of when I was a kid, growing up in South Carolina here, um, at the time, I did not have cable. So, needless to say, my only interactions that I had with Star Trek were whatever showed on broadcast TV, which would be whatever Star Trek movie until Next Gen showed up, and then it would be Next Gen. But when Blockbuster opened and they started carrying the original series on VHS, that was
Yes.
the first time I actually saw an episode of Star Trek, which was a piece of the action because I will never forget
Ah,
it.
yeah, I remember that one,
So,
Viv.
and
the
then from
lobsters.
there on out, and then it was just whatever Blockbuster
That's so
had in the
funny.
time.
That's so funny
So,
to hear you say that you actually discovered it through home video and not just syndication television.
okay, see, through syndication television, I just saw just the movies. I never
Yeah.
saw the actual show until Blockbuster.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's
See,
interesting.
that's, see, so, I'm obviously I'm a little older than you. I kind of grew up with that syndicated television mentality, which doesn't exist anymore. I mean, it just doesn't. I mean, maybe you can find reruns of Two and a Half Men or Big Bang Theory or something like that in like the
Mm.
6:30
But
p.m.
not in the way that you and I remember it, because I remember the same way.
Yeah.
I when I was living in Dayton, 4 or 5 years old, I remember some of my first memories are sitting here watching Star Trek on syndicated TV with my dad, building models, building a Romeo and Warbird while we're watching Star Trek on TV, just old reruns. And yeah,
Wow.
it's not like that anymore.
Yeah.
It's
Oh,
not.
No.
and even for Gilbert, so your memory is a little different because it's a little more a step forward from that with the home
Mm.
video market and
Right.
Blockbuster video and all that stuff. And it's like, you know, we
But see,
we
that was when I didn't have cable. Once I got cable, then opened up sci-fi, and then
Right.
right.
had Star Trek, original series, Next Gen, and then well at the time Deep Space Nine was just starting. So yeah.
Well, the thing was there were markets that we could go to consume entertainment. And the markets were originally
Mhm.
very, very small. I mean, I remember there were three networks. It was just ABC, CBS, and NBC, and then Fox came on board as the fourth one. So, the choices we had for entertainment were much fewer. And it slowly got bigger with each decade that followed because home video became big in the 80s. Cable
Mhm.
television, which really kind of started more in the late 70s, I think it was, became big in the 80s. The internet didn't really grow until the 90s. So we could wrap our mind around it. We could wrap our hands around it. A lot of it was physical, right, with the Blockbuster stuff as well. So maybe that's how it was so easy to get attached to certain things is these were our entertainment choices at that time, and we didn't think that they were limited. We were happy and thrilled with what we had. I mean, a new release day at Blockbuster was a big deal. There was a new release section. I remember it vividly, and so I'd always gravitate towards that. I would go to Tower Records and go to the new release section for the latest uh, VHS or DVD releases that came out. I would always gravitate there first. But nowadays, you see, it's gotten so damn big. It's out of control. And so, the audiences are shrinking, everything's being fragmented. And this is the explosion that became cable television and the internet and now streaming platforms. And that's why audiences are so tiny. It's because there's so many choices. So how do you latch on to something nowadays? You
That's
almost need a
difficult.
friend or something, or I don't know how people will find certain things the way we used to find them. It was so much easier to find these choices. And nowadays, I just think the choices are too big. They're too infinite. I mean, I was talking to somebody about this recently. When I was a kid, if you were an actor who was a series regular on ABC, CBS, NBC, or Fox, you were a star. I mean, you were a star. Everyone knew who you were. You were a household name. You were in magazines.
And don't forget to back up your data. We offer reliable backup services to keep your important files safe. We also offer an electronics recycling program. If it's electrical or electronic, we recycle it. From small businesses to large corporations, your obsolete and unwanted electronics are disposed of in a safe and efficient manner. Visit cnscomputers.com today and let us take care of your tech so you can focus on what matters most. Serving the Stroudsburg and East Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania area. Area code 570-871-3077. Again, that number is 570-871-3077. All right, and with that, also, if you want to listen to the music that we have playing in the minutes of what am I trying to say? Oh my goodness, I'm getting my words all tied up and everything. But needless to say, go to gcpr.live, become a beta tester for the GCPR Android app, and you can hear all of our shows, hear all of the people that do all of our great shows, from the help desk to every morning waking up with Thomas Bishop with the sound of coffee, ending it with T. Nathan. You'll get laughs, you'll get highly entertained. So go to gcpr.live, download the GCPR app, help me out. Let me know if you like it, let me know if you hate it. And on that, I'll end this, and so I will tell you, everybody,